Hi, everyone, and welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Kevin Thibault, Secretary of the Florida Department of Transportation. As Secretary, Kevin oversees the lead agency in the state government with the statutory responsibility to coordinate the planning and development of a safe, viable, and balanced transportation system serving all regions of the state, and to assure the compatibility of all components, including multimodal facilities. Kevin has spent half his professional career in the private sector providing transportation engineering services for a number of states, including Florida, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, Indiana, and California, as well as several Canadian transportation entities. For over 16 years, he has served in various roles within FDOT, from project management to executive leadership, and has consistently focused on the importance of partnerships to deliver the transportation needs of the state. Kevin serves on the board of directors of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, AASHTO, where he also serves as chair of the Council on Water Transportation. He serves on the board of directors of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America and has served on the board of IBTTA. Kevin is passionate about mentorship and building a diverse workforce for the future of Florida's transportation system. He served on numerous university advisory boards and councils. Kevin received his Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Kevin, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Great to be here, Pat. Exciting to be able to join you today.
My pleasure as well. Well, this is Café IBTTA, where we drink coffee and talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. And first off, I want to give a big shout out to the nearly 700 delegates, both in person and virtual, who joined us in Anaheim for our first in-person conference in more than 2 years. We had a total of 681 registrants, including 87 virtual attendees. Thanks to our hosts, sponsors, exhibitors, chief meeting organizers, the meeting planning group, and speakers for making the meeting a huge success. And special thanks to my colleagues on the IBTTA staff for revving up our meeting machine and delivering an amazing experience for our delegates. Well, we are taking your questions and comments, and we want to get started right away. Our guest, Kevin Thibault, is a big believer and practitioner in the art of mentoring. So, as our first question, we would ask you to please type a word or phrase that expresses your thoughts or feelings or experiences with mentoring. And please use the choice of everyone or all panelists and attendees. Give us a word or phrase that describes your feelings or experiences with mentoring. All right. Invaluable, motivating, passing the baton, rewarding, terrific, necessary, gratitude, inspiring, satisfying. Boy, these are really good words.
Yes.
Rewarding, invaluable, and gratitude. These are pretty valid feelings, I'd say, Kevin, huh?
Right, yeah, reciprocal. I like that one. Chris.
Reciprocal.
Yeah.
Good one. All right. Well, we're going to be talking quite a bit about mentoring today, so keep those thoughts and feelings and words coming in. And I want to get started now, Kevin. As we often do, we ask our guests to talk about the early years. And I invite you to tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you were educated, and how you came to work in the field of transportation. Tell us.
All right, Pat. Well, again, glad to be here. Glad to see you get your cup of coffee there. And and I told Pat before, this has been great. What a great idea to do this Café IBTTA and keep connecting to the community and to the greater group as in the industry. My background, as many of you probably do know me, and you can tell from my accent, I am not a native Floridian, right? And today I'm actually in our Panhandle district, which is more of a lower Alabama influence than it is anything else. But I grew up in Massachusetts and went to, obviously, as Pat mentioned earlier, University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, which is kind of on the south coast of Massachusetts down towards the Cape. And at the time, it was not known as UMass Dartmouth. It was known as Southeastern Massachusetts University. And so they combined some of the state universities into one big program, UMass program. So glad to be a part of that. I still serve on the College Advisory Board for the College of Engineering, the Dean's Advisory Board. And so twice a year, I get to participate in meetings back home, see the old campus, see what's been going on, and it's a great opportunity to kind of engage on what's going on in our education. Clearly, I started off up there in the Commonwealth in the New England area and started my career actually in the private sector. Never thought I would be in the public sector back then. And it was 1988 when I moved to Florida. And it was one of those that I just never went back. You know, got used to the weather and said, this is where I want to be.
Well, that's great. And of course, you know, the great New England Patriot quarterback, Tom Brady, he's also moved to Florida. So you have
That's
some
right.
company there, right?
That's exactly right. Yes.
So Kevin, you spent a number of your early years as an engineer in Florida DOT. Tell us about some of your experiences as a younger engineer in your career.
Yeah, so, you know, one of the things, and I tell this to our training program and those that are our interns that come into the department and others, that when I get a chance, is never say no to an opportunity. As a young engineer, I had started off with a small firm, like I mentioned earlier, it was only 20 people in the firm. So you had to be a little bit of a jack of all trades. And in doing so, there were opportunities that would come up. They would say, Kevin, I need you to go out and survey this property or this project, or I need you to go out there and do some research on this. So I need you to go and participate in designing a new parking garage, or I need you to look at laying out a railroad bridge and railroad line. Never said no. Took that opportunity and got to learn about how to do that. And so it did help me later on in my career as I got exposed to the department and other opportunities. It then gave me that nugget of knowledge back in the day. So I will tell younger engineers all the time, don't say no to those opportunities.
You know, Kevin, you make me think about a mentor in my career who very early in my career said to me, you know, Pat, one of the advantages of working for this organization is you're not limited by your job description. And you know, it's a truism, but I also had to laugh at it too, because it gave my boss license to ask me to do anything he wanted me to do. So, you know, and if you're willing, you're going to get some really good experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
that's right.
So Florida DOT, I understand, has some vital principles that sort of guide your operation and guide your vision. And they include improving safety, enhancing mobility, inspiring innovation, and fostering talent. Kevin, tell us a little bit about these principles and how they influence the vision and the day-to-day operations of Florida DOT.
Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that, Pat. So when I became secretary almost 3 years ago now, one of the things that I wanted to do was to build on what was done by my predecessors. I wanted to be more evolutionary in my leadership here at the department than revolutionary. Why change and go 180 degrees a different way? Why not build on what was done in the past? And so to focus the agency on how we move forward and how we meet our mission, because at the end of the day, the mission of the DOT, like most of the state agencies and transportation industry, is about moving people and goods. It really sums it down to these, what we call the vital few, which is a core group of elements that really guide us in how we complete our mission. And as you mentioned, it's about improving safety and how safety is always our top priority here at the department. And it continues to be a vital component of our day-to-day operations, whether it be safety upon how we implement our projects, but more importantly, how we provide a safe transportation system for all Florida's not only residents, but visitors as well. When we talk about enhancing mobility, Pat, it's really a recognizing that it's not one size fits all. There had been a period of time that we were developing policies and procedures that were focused on that one size fits all, and it really didn't quite work. What is needed in Miami is, and as it relates to mobility and the challenges there, is totally different than it is in Tampa Bay, than it is here in the Panhandle. And so we decided to then focus, when we say enhancing mobility, is recognizing that what are those mobility needs for those regions of the state, and how do we accomplish those, and making sure that it meets the current and future needs of our residents and our visitors. So whether that's through the expansion or enhancement of existing roadways, or looking forward to technology and helping us increase multimodal options, we are committed to building that future of Florida today. The third, as you mentioned, is inspiring innovation. You know, the department consistently uses innovation to kind of create that transportation problem solving way about ourselves, but it's, you know, we got to look at throughout the state and have how can we continue to become that leader across the country related to transportation technology innovation. So we are increasing our efforts in using emerging technologies, and that also not only will help us with improving safety, but also will help us with enhancing that mobility that we just talked about. Those first three, Pat, are kind of outward facing, right? And all those that everyone can be a part of. Anybody within the transportation industry can help us with safety, mobility, and innovation. The fourth one, which you referenced, was fostering talent. When the governor interviewed me several years ago about this role, he asked me what he thought was the biggest challenge we had in the Department of Transportation. And here in Florida, as you probably know, Pat, we're a pretty large DOT. We have over 6,000 employees and about a $10 billion annual budget. And I told him it wasn't about the $10 billion annual budget as my challenge. The biggest challenge was how can we recruit and retain the staff that we need so that we can improve safety, enhance mobility, and inspire innovation. And so fostering talent, it's all about recruiting and retaining. What are those key things that we can put in place today that not only helps us retain the talented staff that we have, but also helps us in our recruiting efforts later. So every decision we make, Pat, is guided by this vital few. And again, we're committed to building that transportation system that not only serves close to 22 million residents that we have here in the state, but we typically have over 130 million annual visitors that come here each year.
Kevin, thanks for laying out those key vital few principles there. And I remind everybody, our guest today is Kevin Thibault. He's the Secretary of the Florida Department of Transportation. And we are taking your questions. So please, if you have any questions or comments, we encourage you to write them in the chat function using everyone or all attendees. So here's a question from Snehal Ambare. Do you believe that additional financing tools besides the gas tax would be helpful in meeting the nation's transportation needs? If so, what tools do you think are most promising, especially in Florida?
So, you know, there's been, as you know, Pat, a lot of discussion, and it's occurred for quite a long time now, because we kind of knew where the trend was going related to how we fund transportation traditionally today, right, which is the consumption of the gas and the gas taxes associated with that. It's now come to into the horizon, right? It's in near term. In one of our forecasts that our state economists had done just about a year or so ago, they had forecasted that by either 2027 or 2028 here in Florida, we will have reached the zenith, the top of consumption of motor fuel. And after that, it starts to go down from there. And clearly it was their forecasting of what trends were occurring related to electrification of vehicles, the higher fuel efficiency of vehicles, and so on. So within the department, we've had some discussions, and within our state legislature, about what are those things that may be short-term opportunities as well as long-term opportunities. Last year, our Florida Senate had a bill that was moving a little bit within the Senate about what some other states have done about increasing the registration fee for the electric vehicles, so that we can capture the costs of transportation that they are needing and providing the infrastructure for them. It did not get to the finish line, but I expect probably we will see another iteration of that in the next session. And again, I think there's like 28 other states that are doing something very, very similar. One of the Senate committees that I was able to testify on here in our legislature recently was to really start to plant the seed about what are we really talking about in the future? If we know where the trend is going, do we just spring ahead to where that is going and just do a stopgap in between? So today, we are doing a consumption-based tax system, right? It's now pennies on a gallon. We know what the future energy source is going to be, right? It's going to be batteries and electricity. I mean, that's where it's going. Do we figure out a way to do that consumption base then? Because the traveling public understands that, seems to me, better than anything else. So do we go from a consumption here to a consumption there, set up that milestone, and then between then, bridge that transition? So what I've asked my team to do is to look at what are those options that would come up in front of us so that if our legislative leadership should ask us, hey, what are the options? And I expect that's probably going to come up in the next couple of years. We're ready for that, should that happen.
Kevin, building on that and the loss of the gas tax as a sustainable funding source, let's talk a little bit more about the electrification of the transportation system in Florida. You have some significant plans underway there. Tell us about that.
So yeah, in 2020, our legislature passed Senate Bill 7018 and was signed by Governor DeSantis. So it's now part of our Florida statutes, which required the DOT to coordinate, develop, and recommend a master plan for the development of electric vehicle charging station infrastructure along our state highway system. So the EV master plan was developed in consultation with our state partners, including the Department of Environmental Protection and our Public Service Commission, as well as several other agencies. So what we were trying to do with that, Pat, was look at identifying future electric vehicle charging station types and locations. What are those barriers to adoption? Quantifying revenue impacts, and more importantly, identifying those implementation strategies. So we've done that. We've put together an EV master plan. It is on, you can find it on our website. And it does give us kind of that support of the short range and long range electric vehicle travel, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, as well as, which we see here a lot in this state, emergency evacuation. And how do we handle those emergency evacuation situations? And how do we adapt our state highway infrastructure consistent with the market demand for electric vehicles and ensure obviously the availability of adequate and reliable EV charging stations, whether they be on public owned right of ways or in working in partnerships with some of our other partners in the industry to help provide those needs. So we continue to develop our master plan efforts. They all were formalized into four focus areas, and that's to adapt, facilitate, educate, and coordinate. And each one of those will kind of be the guiding principles as we move that forward.
Thanks, Kevin. I see Rush Wicks has a question about pedestrian and bicycle transportation safety issues, and I want to fold that into a larger question about equity and environmental justice. You know, there seems to be a bigger focus on equity and environmental justice in America today, perhaps more so than at any other time in our history. Tell us about what you're doing in Florida to create a transportation system that's more equitable for all citizens, including pedestrians and bicyclists.
So I'll go to the larger level, the higher level first. Here at the DOT, we're examining kind of some of those past decisions that were made by our predecessors to determine what changes can be made so we can address those issues and topics of transportation equity and accessibility. So we recognize that transportation that has a multiple users and they need to have options to provide their safe mobility and safety needs in mind, regardless of their location, their age, or their income. So as a result, we have developed a number of projects very recently and initiatives that were focused on the equity and accessibility by providing improved safety for all our modes, increasing access to multimodal transportation choices, as long as with reduced congestion options, and improving travel times through rideshare, micromobility options, and so on, especially in our more urban areas. Florida is blessed with a very large state, but it also has a number of urban areas, each again very unique to what their needs are and how we satisfy those different options and needs. So many cases we're operating as a funding partner with others like the Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged, our transit agencies here in the state, our NPOs and TPOs, and additional community providers across the state to serve residents with mobility options that are not only available and accessible, but also affordable. So we're obviously working with them in partnerships with, like, for example, AV shuttles, looking at those as being considered partnerships with our transit agencies, offer first and last mile services where we can, and providing improved access to our major transit routes. Separately, kind of drilling down a little bit more to what you just talked about, Pat, as relates to pedestrian bicycle safety. There was many who, we consistently have a challenge here in Florida about making sure those vulnerable road users are safe. We provide an environment that they can have those activities 365 days a year. And so I don't look at comparisons to other states because it's not realistic. It's more of like an apples and orange thing. I look at what do we got going on here in the state and how can we move the needle in safety so we get to what our ultimate goal is. And I haven't mentioned this earlier, is we got a Vision Zero goal here in the state. Our goal is to get to 0 fatalities, 0 serious injuries. And that doesn't make any difference if it's the motorists or the pedestrians or any of those users. So we continue to develop concepts and techniques, leveraging engineering, leveraging education, leveraging our partnership with law enforcement to look at opportunities to continue to improve safety for all those pedestrians and those vulnerable road users. And so we'll continue to do that as we move forward.
Thanks, Kevin. We've got a question here about climate change and climate deniers, and I want to fold that into the question I have about sustainability. We're seeing the effects of climate change with more frequent and more severe storms. Tell us about what Florida DOT and other state agencies are doing to prepare for adaptation and resilience.
So our governor has challenged us and several of our state agencies to look at and implement a resiliency policy that focuses on a number of different factors. So here at the department, ours is focused on sea level rise, it's focused on flooding, it's focused on storm events, as you were mentioning, Pat, and then identify those strategies through planning, project development, design, construction, and so on, to make sure that we're providing a resilient transportation infrastructure. So for us, when we look at the resilient part, we look at how can we understand the vulnerabilities that we have and the threats that are in our system, and prioritizing investments that within a risk tolerance kind of framework. So the department's design criteria has been focused on ensuring safe operations and maximizing service life of all of our facilities. So even today, we continue to learn from each and every storm that comes across the state. We tend to, knock on wood, we had a pretty good year this year. I know we've got a few more weeks to go, but we continue to design and build our infrastructure to enhance readiness and response to those storm events through the design and construction of a range of adaptation measures, such as armoring our roadways, putting in seawalls, putting in articulated concrete blocks, rubble riprap. We enjoy a lot of mileage along the coastline here in the Sunshine State. And so we got to be prepared to absorb those wave forces, especially during hurricane events. And then we continue to revise and strengthen our design strategies for coastline protection and bridges through lessons learned as part of those past storm inspections. The areas of the bridge that cannot be built above the wave elevation designed to resist the wave and buoyancy forces caused by those storm surges. So that's just some examples of what we're doing here in Florida.
Kevin, I want to return to a subject that we talked about a little bit earlier, and that is mentoring. Obviously, somebody who's reached your position in life and your career, you've had mentors, and I know that you've mentored others. Tell us a little bit about some of the experiences you had of being mentored and what you've done to pay that forward.
So one of my earliest mentors is going to be no stranger to this industry, and it was Jim Ely, who was the director of the Turnpike for a number of years. I had the fortunate opportunity to work for Jim starting way back in 1990. I was only 12 years old at the time. No, I was a little bit older than that. So the gray hair gives it away, Pat. Yeah, so Jim, I was a project manager at the time working for the Turnpike, and he gave me the challenge and the opportunity to serve with him for a number of years as his director of production, overseeing all our engineering aspects way back in 1995. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I would always listen to Jim and see, it's kind of one of those silent mentoring, right? It's not as formal, it's kind of the informal type. And I tell others, you can have informal mentoring all the time, all around you, it's happening. Grab onto those nuggets and learn. And Jim was a very astute individual, and I don't think he realized in some, I think he knew in some aspects, and some other aspects we were all learning from him. And he had purposely, in every groundbreaking and ribbon cutting, make sure he was the last speaker. Didn't make any difference who it was. It could be the governor, whoever was there. He was always last. And I learned from him that the reason why he did that, and he told me this later, is that so if one of the earlier speakers got a little long-winded, he could gauge the crowd and say, I'm not going to hardly say anything. Let's go cut the ribbon. Let's go push the shovel in the ground. And that's typically what Jim would do. He wouldn't worry about those prepared notes that he have, and he have them. He would just say, gang, it's time to go cut the ribbon. And so I've learned that, and many others from him and others along the way that just helped me in my career. And I hopefully try to pass on those things to others along the way.
Kevin, I have a similar memory of Jim Ely. He's a mentor of mine as well. And I remember many years ago when I first joined IBTTA, Jim was a member of the IBTTA board, and he was also chair or vice chair of the programs task force. This was the group that planned the annual meeting. And I remember having a phone conversation with him where it was very pleasant, and he asked me to do like a dozen things. And I finished with that phone conversation. I thought, you know, I've got a dozen more things to do than I had before, but I feel good about it, you know? And he's the kind of guy who could make you feel good about having more work to do. And
that's right.
I think that's a sign of a good mentor.
Absolutely.
Kevin, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to come back to you for some final words of wisdom. All right?
Okay.
So everybody, don't forget to complete the survey at the end of Café IBTTA. We really want to hear what you think about the program and how we can improve. We have several upcoming events. November 4 through 5 is our Maintenance, Engineering, and Roadway Operations Workshop, and it is going to be virtual. We were originally planning to have it in person, but it's now going to be virtual. And if you're already registered for that meeting, you should have received an email from Wanda Clayman explaining what the new situation is. We've got 3 great sessions. We've got some great special topic speakers. We're going to have a virtual bourbon tasting, so we won't miss out on that. And the full program for that meeting will be online on Monday. December 9th, we have our book club hosted by the Task Force on Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion, and we will discuss I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. And the entire schedule for 2022 meetings is already up on the website. We have quite a few webinars between now and the end of this year, so please check out IBTTA's website for further details about all of our upcoming events. And once again, don't forget to complete the survey at the end of this Café IBTTA. So, Kevin, back to you. what final words of wisdom do you have before we sign off today?
The one thing you mentioned early in my bio and intro is I serve on a number of boards. I was very fortunate to serve on IBTTA. I really enjoyed my service there over those couple of years, and now on AASHTO and several others. For those that are on this and others that board service can be rewarding not for only yourself, but those that you influence and interface with. Take every opportunity you can to provide value to that board, but also receive something in return. Continue those networking, continuing those contacts will help you obviously both personally as well as professionally. Again, Pat, thanks for having me here.
Kevin, thank you so much for being our guest today. It was wonderful having you. And to all our guests, be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, Kevin.